Hello, I am Dee Knudsen, and I would like to call our July 16th informational to order. And our first order of business, as usual, will be our staff report from Deborah Owen.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Sioux Falls City Council. Just a couple of things on tonight's 7 o'clock meeting. There's been a request to withdraw items number 1 and number 17 on your agendas. And then also, just to help clear up any confusion, we had a few conversations today. There on the Uptown Agreement, which is the conveyance for the deed of land, is there's a contract there, and that is actually a draft contract that won't be executed tonight. And then just to remind you that there's a joint meeting today at 5 o'clock at the Minnehaha County Building, and then it's a breakfast club this week, Wednesday at 7:30 in the morning at Leonardo's Cafe. And that's it.
Thank you, Deborah. At this point, I would like to have the committees give their weekly report, and then oh, sorry, excuse me, I made a mistake already. It's kind of early in the day to make a mistake. Sorry about that, I'd like Tamara Jorgensen from our staff to give a report, an update on how the Granicus program is going.
Thank you, ladies. Good afternoon, Council. It's my intent to give you a light preview of what the Granicus program can bring to the citizens of Sioux Falls and to the City Council. I will try to keep this under 8 minutes, if at all possible. When the citizens go on the city's website, they can see this screen that will show them a listing of our City Council meetings, our informational City Council meetings, special meetings, planning, and recently the CIP budget hearings were added this morning. This is what the citizens will see. They'll be able to click on agendas, look at the agendas, the minutes, or the video. I would like to draw your attention to upcoming events. These are pre-scheduled meetings. Are you able to see them on your screens at your desk or no? Okay. These are upcoming events are the meetings that are coming up this evening and the Planning Commission meeting. If you'll notice the time, it's set a little bit ahead of time of the actual meeting. This is a safety precaution that Granicus has provided, which means that if an unplanned event occurs and the Assistant City Clerk is not here, the meeting will immediately start to tape and we'll be able to capture the information at the City Council meeting. There is a box for search archives. So if you were somebody that knew that your item was on a City Council meeting but you couldn't remember what meeting it was on and you wanted to search for it, you have the ability to do it rather quickly with this feature. And I'm going to use as an example, recently we had a lease agreement with the University of South Dakota, and I'm going to use that as an example. You would type in a search word and push button search. What's going to come up is every meeting that item was mentioned at. And you can tell it was mentioned at an informational meeting. It was mentioned at first reading at a City Council meeting on July 2nd, and second reading was on July 9th. Now, if you wanted to actually view the video on those items, you could click on the link. This will bring you to a video and the agenda for the meeting of July 9th. And I have the volume turned down here. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it if you just give it a minute. And this is speaking directly about item 4 and item 4 only, because that is the link that we clicked on. I should tell you that the screen that I have in front of me has the video on the upper left-hand side and has the agenda on the right-hand side, and that is what the visitors at home, the viewers at home will see. I'm going to try toggling the screen so you can see exactly what I'm looking at. Okay, that is what the people at home will be able to see. You have the option here to click any item on the agenda and go to it immediately, or you can go over to the actual agenda and click on the right-hand side to go to that item. Now let's pretend for that particular meeting that I participated in the Whittier neighborhood cleanup and that's the only item I wanted to see. You can click over here on item 12 on the right-hand side, or you can go to the drop-down box and click here. And that will take you
Item 12 is a resolution
specifically to that purpose.
cleanup effort held on May 19, 2007.
So what I like,
I have a blank screen in front of me, so I can't follow along with you on this. But I will tell you that in the future, the items on the right will also contain what we normally know as now as our electronic agenda, is an internal procedure that we use with the city administrative departments. On the Granicus program underneath the item, we will have an electronic link to the actual ordinance, an electronic link to the actual map, any contracts that are attached, There are other city departments that actually tape their own meetings now, and this will be a connection to a video. If you have a planning commission item on here, we'll have a link to the actual video of the planning commission portion of the meeting that pertains to that item number. So the whole access for people who want to research the item number. The Granicus program also allows us to do transcripts. If you have a meeting that is being televised that is also being closed captioned, you'll have the ability to print a transcript of the whole meeting or of just of the section that's being discussed. But I should tell you that the transcript is only going to show what the transcriber has actually inputted. It will not be a verbatim set of the minutes. And that is all I have at this time. Are there any questions?
Tamara, thank you very much for the hard work you've put in mastering this exciting new program, and I think it'll be very helpful to counselors. I think it'll be very helpful to all of our citizens in Sioux Falls if they decide to make good use of it. So thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to have the committee reports, but I am going to just refer to the chairman from the old committee, so to speak, and then I will make announcements on the new committee structure, okay? And so we'll start with the audit committee, and Kevin Kavanaugh, would you give us an update on anything you have for us?
Thank you. I believe we have a status report. Status report from Rich Oaksall, our chief internal auditor. My mic.
Rich Oaksall, lead internal auditor. As promised, we had a formal report for you of sort of the mid-year where we're at. Basically, it's just what we're doing, what we have yet to start, and what we've completed. I'm looking at that first page where it says summary results. 2 audits in process right now. The construction contracts should be finished about September or so. We also have cash handling. We should have that sort of wrapping that up next month in August. 2 audits on the program that we haven't started yet. Washington Pavilion Management, we should start that next month. And purchasing and procurement, we'll probably start that in September. And that's detailed in the back of your report there. The work that we've completed so far is listed there. Asset verifications, that consists of cash counts unannounced, fixed assets, and also supplies and materials inventory. We've completed, I believe, 3 fixed assets departments, the museum, planning and media services, and the public parking facilities. That consists of basically going out, picking a sample of fixed assets, make sure they're there, that they have a city barcode, that they appear to be properly safeguarded. The supplies and materials inventory is basically spare parts and consumables. We've gone out to the water plant and the water reclamation. We're going to do some more of that this year. You take a sample of items, you go out to the inventory, you make sure that, say, 30 items are supposed to be there. You count the items with the inventory person, make sure that they're there. Then you make note of any percent of variance. The results are normally reported in a memo to management. All assets are properly accounted for. Vendor payments. We looked at about 12 months worth of vendor payments. That's basically our supplies and material contracts. Whether we bid those or we're buying off the state contract, we want to see that the vendor is invoicing us for the correct bid price for whether it's firefighter clothing, chemicals for the water plant, chemicals for the street department, that sort of thing. We did a year's worth of looking at that, and we're pleased to report the vendors are invoicing us for the proper amounts. We'll continue doing that sort of thing every year. The fraud risk assessment is completed. I have a report done. As soon as the audit committee has looked at that and is okay with that, we will be making that public. We're hoping for August 6th. We hope to meet with the audit committee in about 2 weeks so that they can go over that report, and we'll have a number of recommendations for you. Anti-fraud procedures, we'll also have that report done. I'm working on that report this week. That consists of very specific anti-fraud procedures. just the results of that, and we'll be discussing that with the audit committee. We don't have any, there's no earth-shaking news here. We're not onto a major fraud or even a minor fraud. We're happy to report, but we'll discuss that, and you should have a report next month on that. I'm pleased to report our staff has been very cooperative. We're very thankful for that. The directors, the managers, and the staff have been very cooperative and provided great assistance to us as auditors. And there's more information on the 2 pages attached to that. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me or call me or talk to me. Do you have any questions at this time?
Kevin?
Rich, you made a reference, at least twice, I believe, to reports that have actually been done.
Yeah, I have written the reports.
But have not been reviewed by the audit committee.
That is correct.
I wonder if you would review for the council for their, just so it's a reminder, why we do that.
We do that, so it's a protection for the lead auditor, for one thing, and also a sort of a, you could call it sort of a peer review. Would have a knowledgeable group look at that report. If there's anything that they want to discuss with management and give them that opportunity. But it's part of our audit charter. That's the way that we want to do that, and that's a very common procedure. It's a best practice that the reports are reviewed by the committee first and then presented to the city council.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Rich, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dee.
And then I would just like to say the audit committee, I'd like to thank Kevin Kavanaugh for chairing us this last year. And Pat Costello is going to chair the audit committee. Or excuse me, I'm sorry. Kevin is going to continue to chair the audit committee, and Pat is going to serve on the audit committee with Kevin, and we're going to have Bob Jameson chair another committee. So anyway, it's just an update, and those committee assignments now are effective immediately, with one small waiting detail on public services, which I'll explain later. So anyway, so good luck, both of you, on the audit committee this next year. And now how about fiscal committee? Vernon, could you give us an update on that?
No report.
Okay. And our fiscal committee is going to stay the same this year. It's going to continue to be Vernon Brown, Gerald Benega, Pat Costello, and Kevin Kavanaugh. So it's the same team, a very capable team. We appreciate their hard work. They've met so many times this last year, and Pat Costello is going to chair that group this year. Again, in the last few years, we've kind of had a tradition of just moving chairs around, and so that's the reason for the change there, and that is, of course, the only reason. And Land Use Committee, Mr. Litz?
No report.
Okay, is Bob Jameson is going to chair our Land Use Committee going forward from today, but Bob Litz will continue to serve on that committee, and so will Kermit Staggers. So the makeup of the Land Use Committee will stay the same also. And Public Services Committee, I know that our chairman, Kermit Staggers, is not here today, but I can tell you that the Public Services Committee has been working exclusively on campaign reform at the city level, and we've had lots of interesting discussion, as you probably read in the paper recently. And anyway, we are not meeting again until the 30th of this month, so we did not meet today. And we, of course, welcome more input from other counselors and, of course, the public and staff and so forth. And we are making good progress on a proposal that we will be bringing to all of you in the near future. And Vernon Brown is going to chair the Public Services Committee for us this next year, but I've asked him to just allow Kermit Staggers to just finish his work on the campaign reform since we're so close to the end, and I believe that is fine with Councilor Brown. So the Public Services Committee for this year will be Vernon Brown chairing us. Kermit Staggers will stay on that committee. I will serve on that committee, and Bob Jameson will chair our Public Services Committee. So thank you, all of you, for your cooperation on getting these committees lined up, and I think they're pretty much where you all wanted to be, so I appreciate your help on that. And then just a couple other quick things, because I know that we have a meeting at 5 o'clock. I'd just like to remind you that the City Council staff is anxious to just get a little bit of biographical information from you for the new City Council website page. And so go ahead and give them some information when you can. And then with that, I would like to welcome a guest from the Walker parking study operation, and his name is Phil Barron from Indianapolis. So welcome, Phil.
Great. Thank you, councilors, Mayor Munson. Just wanted to give you a brief update of the study that we've been working on for the last several months, the downtown parking study, where we looked at the supply-demand issues, potential development sites, and opportunities to finance new parking. And I'm just going to go over briefly, for sake of time, PowerPoint and the agenda. I want to talk about our scope of services, because there's been some discussion about sub-issues that have come up related to parking. And I want to make sure we're clear about what we were retained to do and go over those items and talk about the study area, go over the current conditions, future conditions, the sites that we looked at, and then the preliminary financial analysis, which ultimately the site analysis and the supply-demand rely on the outcome of the financial analysis. Without a positive outcome there, planning is on hold. There isn't any money to pay for it if we don't have an adequate fund to support the future development. Here we go. The primary tasks are scope of service. We looked at current conditions, where we assessed the future, and we looked 10 years out. And to do that, we looked at the potential developments. We spoke with developers. We met with several different community groups. We had 5 public meetings, and then a 6th meeting, which was more of an informative meeting of the outcome of this study, approximately a month ago. And we obtained information from the community and looked at development plans. We worked with city planning. We put together a future model. What would Sioux Falls look like in 10 years as far as commercial real estate, residential activity, and put together a model to try to estimate that amount that would be needed as far as parking. We then looked at potential development sites. Where could we accommodate the needs? And we tried to look at it from an equitable standpoint and not consolidate all the parking resources into one location, but try to serve the greater good of downtown. We looked at the construction costs in $2,007. And then we looked at the enterprise fund. Can the fund support it and hold true to the guiding principles of the enterprise fund, which is to be self-supporting? And then we looked at potential financing methods that other communities are using. Parking is a hot topic in many communities that are growing, and so we provided a list of different alternatives that could potentially be viable. The study area, 46 block area. Some of you may be familiar with this slide, but real quickly, Falls Park Drive down to 14th Street, Weber to Minnesota. Pretty much covers the core central business district, as well as areas where future growth is anticipated to occur. Our present conditions. During the peak hour at 10 a.m. on a weekday, we found 65% of the supply was utilized. That's not uncommon. The perception many people have is that if parking in their immediate sphere is full, the whole downtown is full. But the reality is, in a large 46-block area, there's a lot of underutilized supply, specifically on street. The city-owned, if we look at a subsection of the total supply, the city-owned supply has a higher utilization rate, 86%. And actually, what we see, the city practices overselling of the parking supply. And so the reality on paper is that they're about a little over 100% utilized. But the physical presence of the cars is about 86% on a given day. That's current conditions. When we look at the future conditions, in 10 years out, there's a potential need for additional 5,000 spaces. And I stress that's heavily predicated on the developments coming to fruition. If they don't, that number is not needed. You'll be overbuilding and have a white elephant property that requires debt service payment. So just wanted to stress that that future projection number is based on information that we received from community developers and city planning. We looked at two scenarios. One, if river ramp is removed. If the ramp is removed, the need, looking at existing supply and the availability in the existing supply overlap with the future development, is about 1,500 spaces. If the river ramp remains in service along with 8th Street lot, it's just shy of 1,000 spaces 10 years out. So that's a key variable that we wanted to assess and model what's going to happen to the river ramp. Future conditions, the core area where we found the need to be is right near river ramp in the central area of the downtown district. There's large corporations in that region, so employee presence is high. Future site planning analysis, what we did is we looked at the core areas where we found peak need, and we identified 7 potential development sites. We didn't contact any landowners. We did it purely from an independent standpoint based on proximity to the need. And as you can see on the slide, we have those sites. And what we did is we worked with the Public Parking Advisory Board to come up with different criteria to weigh each site and rank them independently from a matrix standpoint. And on the slide, I can briefly go through them, but we looked at proximity to demand, project cost, land availability, revenue potential, traffic impact, mixed-use potential. Those were important items to the advisory group. So that's based on what we based that on our evaluation. We based those criteria on our evaluation. We also looked at hard costs. Now, I stress that the cost that you see in front of you, the construction cost, doesn't include soft costs, land acquisition, potential tenant relocation, demo. That purely takes into consideration hard costs. And historically, over the last 5 years, the cost of concrete and building a parking structure has been going up rapidly. And this is based on the most recent information, 2007 numbers that our firm has. And the range on cost per space that we're finding is anywhere from $10,000 all the way up to $20,000. It all depends on the size of the parking space. That's based on a square footage number. I can get into it in more detail if you'd like at another time. Once we got into the financial analysis of the existing enterprise fund, we identified the trend that's occurring. We identified revenues have increased by about 5.5% from 2000 to 06. Expenses, 29%. The NOI, consequently, has been decreasing. And so what we've seen is a trend that wouldn't support the development of new parking. There's existing bond covenants in place that the Parking Enterprise Fund has to honor, and if any additional debt was taken on, that would be a breach of those bond covenants. So when we identify the negative trend here, we ask the question, what needs to be done? What happens when revenues are stagnant, expenses are increasing, NOI is decreasing? We look at adjusting the rates, the pricing. So we took a look at historical rate increases, and we found that over a 10-year period, there hasn't been a significant amount of rate increase and adjustment in downtown. And that's not uncommon either for communities. What we see is when the development starts to expand rapidly, typically cities have to play catch-up. And that's a challenge and from a political standpoint. And so what we're recommending is that actions be taken to start to catch up over a graduated period of time, not immediately, but over a 5-year period, to get back in line and caught up with the outpacing of expenses that have occurred over the last 10 years. We looked at 2 financial scenarios. One, as-is conditions. Rates remain the same. We continue to operate as is. And we also looked at increasing rates over a 5-year period. Under scenario 1, where we look at as-is conditions, the NOI is insufficient to cover the debt, and that prohibits the enterprise fund from contributing to developing new parking from a financial standpoint. Scenario 2, when we looked at increasing rates, we surveyed other communities similar size. We tried to benchmark Sioux Falls to similar communities in this region of the country, and we increased rates and found that if we do that, it's sufficient to pay existing debt the enterprise fund. However, it can only contribute a portion to new parking. It wouldn't be able to fund the entire development. And we could have modeled showing rates that would support a brand new parking facility and be self-sufficient, but it was out of line with what we felt the market would bear and how it compared against other benchmark communities. The next steps after our study, we met with the Parking Advisory Board and also the Parking Department. We came up with action plans, which are more detailed in the report, but I just summarized them for the presentation here. We need to identify specific rate adjustments and a timeline on those. They may be in line with what the report recommends. They may be staggered differently, but the main principle that we're trying to convey is that actions need to be taken if the Parking Enterprise Fund is going to be used as a tool to support future parking development, specifically public parking. Also, the establishment of a repair and replacement fund. Being a good steward of the community's public parking requires maintaining them on a regular basis and not deferring maintenance. We find that deferring maintenance on parking is frequent in many communities, and the cost to repair, do full slab replacement or removal of a ramp can far exceed what it would cost to build a brand new facility. And then we look at prioritizing the development sites. There's been a lot of discussion about the sites that we looked at, which one ranks the highest. And one thing I need to make sure everybody understands is that the sites were based on certain criteria and certain development coming to fruition as planned. If a certain development doesn't happen in a timely manner, that site may rank down low. The demand may never come to pass. Whereas a smaller development may be developed more expeditiously and create demand in an area requiring parking. So I wanted to make sure that the Parking Advisory Board had the flexibility to prioritize the sites beyond the criteria that we established with them. And we would like to look out 1 to 4 years and 5 to 10. And then also another step that needs to begin is a comprehensive due diligence process, looking down the road. If rates are going to be implemented and sinking fund is going to be implemented, start looking at development sites that are strong possibilities, taking it another level deeper, and looking at specific ways to finance the facility, whether it be through public-private partnerships, TIF districts, or parking revenue bonds issued by the Enterprise Fund. Any questions at this point in time?
Councilor Brown.
I have a couple questions. First of all, what other cities in similar size to Sioux Falls have you done these kind of studies?
We've looked at Sioux City, Iowa. Fargo had a study done a couple years back. Lincoln, Nebraska. Wichita, Kansas, for example.
And what kind of trends were you seeing in those cities in terms of self-supporting or subsidized parking downtown? If you give us some sort of a picture of what you saw.
Correct. The self-supporting scenario rarely existed. The rates aren't high enough to cover the parking expenses. Contrary to a lot of the general public's belief, parking is charged to users, but the rates are rarely high enough, specifically municipal parking, public parking. If parking was extremely profitable, we would see private developers building a lot more of the parking. So 9 out of 10 times we would see a subsidy of some sort, and that would come through general fund. And if it's an enterprise fund, there would be partnerships with local employers to bridge the gap, that they would charge enough, but the burden on the actual employee would be in line with what they could bear, but the incremental amount to break even on the enterprise fund would be covered by the community, whether it's through a business improvement district or TIF district or some sort of just contribution, employer contribution.
And you maybe don't get to this level of detail, but what kind of hourly rate would we have to see on the streets in order to be self-supporting?
Now, I can break it down to in the increment of a monthly, because downtown, the primary user is monthly parkers. And I can actually provide for you a matrix that we have based on the construction cost, operating expenses, assuming a financing term of 20 years at 6%. But what we typically see is over $100 a month, you begin to break even. Short-term parking, just a side note, short-term parking or daily parking is much more profitable. And in a community where the demographics is heavily weighted towards monthly users, you're not generating as much as you potentially would if you were charging hourly. But the market rate now for short-term parking isn't strong enough. Many of the parking facilities offer purely monthly parking. And if we broke down an hourly rate of, flat parking fee of $10 a day, and you have 2 turns or 3 turns, that could be $30 a day for that space versus $60 a month for that space. So see what I'm saying about the profitability is greater with short-term. And in this market right now, the mixture of land uses, only on Phillips Avenue do you have a lot of turnover, and that's served by on-street. But in the structures, there isn't a lot of turnover.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Barron. I do have a question for Randy Bartunek as well. When we're talking about parking downtown on Phillips Avenue, we've lengthened the time limit there, but the side streets on Phillips Avenue, what is the thinking behind only allowing an hour on those spots? I hear more complaints about people who are 5 minutes late on their lunch and get a $5 charge for a ticket. Why do we not have longer time periods
Well, I think
on those?
most of the meters on the side streets are probably at 2 hours now. They're not at an hour, but those areas where we do have an hour, those are requested by businesses in that area because there are certain businesses that demand and require that turnover. And so it is a difficult balance to find what is that mix. Do you put it all at 2 hours at the expense of those businesses that need that turnover? So it's difficult to make everybody happy, so we try to, if the majority of the businesses in one area want longer-term parking like happened at Phillips Avenue, you bet, we're going to change it, and that's what we did there.
Okay. Thank you, Randy.
Any other questions, councilors? Yes, go ahead, Councilor Jameson.
A question, do the other municipalities that have built new structures, how do they fund them? What's been the typical method of funding those, bonding or?
Correct. Typically, we see general obligation bonds, and also supported by any type of additional NOI that's coming off of the enterprise fund. If an enterprise is set up, many communities have parking as a department. It's a utility. It's not an enterprise fund. And so it's expected that it's going to be subsidized. When it's an enterprise fund, the charge is for it to be self-sufficient, and that's where it gets a little tricky to go to council and go to the general fund and ask for a subsidy. But most communities do general obligation bonds. And if they can be GO bonds backed by a TIF that's formed, if all this new development comes to fruition, that incremental amount of tax would be pledged for a specified period of time to the repayment of the infrastructure, the parking infrastructure.
You mentioned TIF.
Correct.
Are they the total source, or are they part of the source?
Part of the source. Yeah, typically, in a mid-sized community, you don't have the volume, the massing that's required, to cover a $300,000 to $500,000 a year bond payment. So typically, it's a portion, and it's like I said, it's a short period of time. Whether it's the period of the financing, whether you finance over 20 years, 25 years. Typically, what we're seeing right now, rating agencies when they look at parking like to see the financing between 20 and 25 years. And they look at the useful life of the parking facility, as between 25 and 50 years.
Then I got to ask, what kind of luck have they had passing GO bonds to fund parking in a downtown area?
Well, the demand has to be there. It can't be speculative demand. Typically, just like if you were building an office tower, you want to have some secured tenants before you break ground. And the theory of building and they will come with parking hasn't proven to be a wise approach. Many people in the community, specifically, like for example, a developer will say, if you've had parking, I will build a building. But there's too many market factors other than parking that drive that decision. There's communities around the Midwest that have parking garages that are empty because they've taken that approach. They built in the hopes that they will come, and they're stuck with a bond payment and insufficient revenue. So parking's a tricky topic. You want to have it there for economic development, but you don't want to be so far ahead of the economic development that you get caught. The risk increases. So,
Thank you.
sure.
Councilor Benega.
Phil, with the need that you showed, did you break that down into how many of those were private enterprise and how many of those spaces could be, in fact, municipal government or joint government need?
We do have that information. I don't have it in the presentation now, but site by site that differed.
Okay.
Like if we looked at the site in the most northern region of town, the city owns the parcel of land close to where Uptown is going to be developed. And we have a large county need. With the expansion of the county courts, the addition of the new building there, the undersupply that currently exists. So a large portion of the facility would be utilized by county employees. And then the remaining amount of supply that's needed would be utilized, in theory, according to the models by the mixed-use development that would be going up there. Now, it's heavily predicated on that development occurring within the next 10 years according to the plan. Any variation, there may be a reduction or an increase. Other sites in the core area are heavily weighted on employees, private employees. But I bring up the most northern site, Site A, simply because there is a heavily weighted distribution towards county employees on that site specifically.
Do you, off the top of your head, remember what percentage that is?
I can give you a range. It was between 40 and 50% of that property. Yeah, definitely. Of the site, of the incremental amount we were recommending. And there's a shared use opportunity there. That's why it was only 40 to 50% roughly, because the peak demand would occur in the evening for the mixed-use development and weekends, which is a tricky situation because weekends and evenings we don't charge for parking. So you're providing parking, but no one's going to be paying for that at that site. During the daytime, it's primarily county employees.
Okay. So you're suggesting that the one site was 40 to 50% governmental almost.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And that was a 12-hour parking period, or is that a 24-hour parking period?
No, that's during the day, weekday. So that'd be approximately a 12-hour period.
And the other sites are almost exclusively private?
Use, absolutely.
Correct. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Barron? Thank you very much
Great.
for coming
Thank
back to
you.
our city to be with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Mayor Munson, do you have any other staff reports today for us? Okay. Open discussion among city councilors here before our county meeting. Would you have any items, any of you? Councilor Brown.
Just a couple of customer service issues that I wanted to bring up to the council and discuss. One that I've heard quite a bit about, Sam Peterson, the man who trapped the skunk. I guess I'm a little disappointed in how we as a city handled that, finding the man who was getting rid of the nuisance. And I'm wondering if the council, Gary, has any authority to rescind that ticket that he had, or if that's not even possible for us to consider.
The council doesn't have it. I'll tell you, I've already dismissed the ticket.
You have dismissed it. Very good.
And it was done after discussion with Mayor Munson.
And then my other question was, I had an email about Project Trim from a citizen, and I don't know that I have the whole story here, but there's no one here from Parks, but what kind of a timeline are people on to get the trees trimmed? Because this is not a great time of the year to be trimming trees in the heat, and I hope that deadline is not in the middle of summer and causing people to harm their trees by doing it now.
I know, Vernon, on that topic that the Director of Parks, Don Kearney, and I had exchanged an email on that topic today, and I know he was going to visit more among his staff on that topic, so I appreciate you bringing that forward today. Anything else, Vernon?
That's it.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Costello.
Vernon, just as a note, as a recipient of one of those letters last year, is a reasonable amount of time, from
Is
what I
it?
recall, so.
Okay.
Any other topics by any of you? If not, I'm going to adjourn the meeting for today. I appreciate you all being here, and we'll meet over at the County Administration Building for our monthly meeting with the County Commission. Thank you.